Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome to Shifting Lanes. My name is Hanson, and for this video you find me sitting in the 2022 Kia EV6. This model is the GT line with E all-wheel drive, and it's painted in the runway red paint with the black suede and white vegan leather trim. All together with delivery, this one costs $57,410. And in this video, I'll share with you my likes and dislikes about Kia's all-new electric vehicle, and also share with you some of the pains of using an EV in a place that's not EV ready. So I've got this Kia EV6 for my vacation, and I figured, why not? This is the perfect time to take an electric vehicle on a road trip and just see how the EV charging infrastructure is doing. My destination, where I'm currently filming, isn't too terribly far from my place, about 3 hours. This is Stone Harbor, New Jersey. It's a quiet and beautiful shore town just a bit north of Cape May, which is at the very southern tip of New Jersey. And I'm going into this road trip with the attitude of, let's just drive down and figure out the charging situation when I get down here. That turns out to be a mistake, as you'll find out later in the video. I started this trip like you'd normally start out road trips, by filling up. I went to an Electrify America station somewhere in northern New Jersey. When I got there, there was only one spot open, which is another scary thing to think of, but that's for another discussion. I plugged myself in and pulled out my app to figure out the billing situation, and it turns out that when you buy a Kia EV6, you get 1,000 kilowatt hours of free charging on Electrify America stations. Judging by the miles per kilowatt hours that this car gets during my testing, that's roughly about 3,500 miles free of charge. Now normally I'd stop at 80% charge as per recommendations, but I'm on a road trip, so I want to top it off as much as I can. So 98% was good enough. That gave me roughly a 273 mile range, which is greater than my 160 mile one-way trip. Once I got on my way, I got a chance to test out the EV6's dual motor performance. This thing rips. It goes 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds. That is fast sports car territory. And given how most of the weight of the EVs are right beneath you and in between the wheels, this car feels very balanced and handles very well. And torque comes on demand as expected. There's no gears to shift into, there's no transmission, there's no need to get into the right power band for optimal acceleration performance. Just step hard on the right pedal and you're well on your way. That means that speeding up on an on-ramp or making those last-minute passes is a very easy thing to do that you might risk looking like a jerk driving in these things. I also noticed all of the nice driver assistance tools in this car. There's an augmented reality heads-up display. It can highlight the car in front of you, and I think this is done to show that the car knows that there's something in front of it and will behave as accordingly. As expected, this has an adaptive cruise control feature, and it can speed up or slow down depending on the conditions. And this also has a really impressive lane centering method. It is so good that I use it for the majority of my trip down here. It greatly reduced driving fatigue because you're not constantly making these micro corrections on the steering and also on the throttle input. The lane centering method also doesn't dither or ping pong from side to side like the earlier iterations. This feels very natural. As for the interior, this Kia EV6 has a similar layout to the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and also the Genesis GV60. These cars are all based off the electric global modular platform, and I've reviewed them before, so check out the links in the description if you're interested. So while the general layout is similar, the interior features and styles are all different, as each company has their own spin on it. For example, the HVAC controls in this EV6 seems like it was ripped out of the Kia Sportage. It has this clever toggle where this entire panel can be used for the HVAC or the music and navigation controls. When you're in HVAC mode, these dials become the temperature control knobs. And when you go into the music or the navigation controls, then these dials become the volume and the tuning knobs. As for the door cards, the steering wheel, the seats, and the floating center console, Kia also has its own style, whereas the Ioniq 5 and the GV60 has their very own different approach. But you will find the same dual 12.3-inch displays and the same software, even though the fonts and the presentation has Kia's own twist to it. The right display is for the infotainment system, which is pretty rock solid. You can also connect Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, although it's only a wired connection. The left screen is your fully digital instrument cluster, and the presentation can change depending on your driving mode. There's a couple of cool tricks on the screen. The first one is a feature that most Kia and Hyundai owners will be familiar with, and that's being able to see your blind spot when you're using your blinkers. This comes with a 360-degree camera system, so it's nice to see those camera assets being used in pretty clever ways. And since this EV6 comes with various sensors and radar on all four corners, you can get a visual representation of what your car is seeing at all times. And just like the other cars on this platform, there's plenty of legroom in the second row at 39 inches, and cargo space is decent at 24.4 cubic feet. When you fold the second row down, that grows to 50.2 cubic feet of space. These numbers are slightly smaller than the Hyundai, but that's because the EV6 has a sleeker profile to the more space-efficient Ioniq 5. Overall, this design has a lot of utility, and it will address most of your commuting and road trip needs. It definitely has more than enough room for me and my stuff for this road trip. And as I made my way down to the Garden State Parkway, I watched the range tick down at a fairly reliable rate, which is a pretty impressive 3.5 to 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. At that point, I started to think about where I can charge, because I know that once I make my way to my destination, I'll have about 100 miles left of charge, which gives me a good bit of freedom. At some point, I looked at my Electrify America app and realized that there were no charging stations near Stone Harbor, New Jersey. And I thought to myself not to worry, because just like other electric vehicles, you can always plug this car into a 110 volt outlet and then just trickle charge overnight. Even though it's going to be very slowly to fully charge the car, it'll at least give me something. That assumption turns out to be another mistake. You see, this Kia EV6 does not come with a charging cable, nor do they provide it as an option that you could buy. They've only provided an actual 5-pin plug with no cable attached to it. This way you can get whatever interface that you want separately. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 includes a plug and a 120 volt cable for free, so I just wrongly assumed that they would have included in here as well. This won't be a big deal for most EV buyers, because chances are they already have a level 2 charging station at home or are planning to install one. But for someone like me who occasionally get these EVs to test, I have to rely on those public charging systems or those charging cables. So once I got to the destination, there was about roughly 100 to 110 miles left, and I couldn't charge overnight. So that means that I have to rely on the very sparse charging network available in this town. Now, there's a couple of level 2 chargers in town, but with a level 2 charger, it would take about 6 to 7 hours to fully charge this car. And there was another, quote, fast charge system in town, but it looks to have been out of commission for a while. So I needed something faster, because I'm here on my vacation and I don't want to spend time charging my car. I needed something 150 kilowatts or faster. So I checked my Electrify America app and found out that the nearest station was 60 miles away. I ended up making the 1-hour drive with about 40 miles left once I got to the station. And once I got there, not only did I get a big sigh of relief to find that all the stations are available and in good working order, I also found that it has the much faster 350 kilowatt station that the EV6 can take advantage of. So this EV6 comes with both the 400 and 800 volt electrical architecture, meaning that this can fully benefit from the fastest chargers out there, like this 350 kilowatt station. So this can theoretically go from 10% to 80% charge in 18 minutes. In my case, I was able to go from 14% to 99%, and that took about 40 minutes. And to prolong the life of the battery, once you go over a certain threshold, the charging speed gets reduced. At the beginning, the charging rate is as high as 189 kilowatts, and at almost 100%, the charging rate is slowed down to a 16 kilowatt crawl. So after getting this charge back up to 274 miles and spending about $30 that I didn't really have to spend because this is still operating under the 1,000 kilowatt hour limit, and then driving another 60 miles back, overall this whole charging session, which took about 3 hours to do, to drive, to charge, and drive back, really only added about 100 to 120 miles to the tank. So what's the whole point of this? Basically, taking an EV to a place that's not EV friendly is tough. And it's made even tougher when you don't have a charging cable that you could hook up to a 110 volt outlet. Some pockets of this country still don't have charging stations, and even if there are stations, there's no guarantee that it will be a fast charging version where you can sit down for 20 to 40 minutes and get going again. And if there's a nugget of wisdom that can be extracted out of all of this, is that there's a lot more planning involved in a road trip with an EV. With gas-powered cars, you don't plan your road trip around gas stations because there's so many gas stations out there and filling up is such an easy thing to do. With EV cars, a road trip becomes a chess game. You have to plan your road trip around your charging stations. As for the car itself, the EV6 has been such a delight to drive. The driving dynamics is really impressive, and the ability to take advantage of the fastest chargers out there right now means you'll spend less time charging and more time on the road. The car also looks pretty good, especially in this runway red color. I think it does a much better job blending in with the rest of the crowd, whereas the Ioniq 5 has a much more quirky look. This top tier EV6 is more expensive than the top tier Ioniq 5 Limited that I tested, but not as much as the GV60, of course. And when it comes down to it, you really can't go wrong with any of these EVs. However, with the EV6, you just have to make sure that you keep a charging cable with you at all times so you don't get stuck. I want to hear your thoughts on this, so please leave your comments down below. If you've learned something or found it entertaining, please consider hitting that like, subscribe, and that notification bell button so that you can be notified anytime we make a new video. Let's wrap it up right there. My name's Hanson. This has been the 2022 Kia EV6, and I'll see you in the next one.